Hi, Alison Kerr, Empowerment Path. Welcome and thank you to the people who have subscribed to my channel and shared my video. It's not easy getting started. I'm not going to say normal. I'm just a person who wants to help, and it's not always that easy to get going. And actually, as somebody who as yet is undiagnosed with neurodiversity, my daughter is in the process at the moment. I'm on the list. I've learned enough about it. I see, I've been saying I've got ADHD. I really identified with that. However, through my daughter's process again, I'm like, right, so that part of it's actually autistic spectrum stuff. Interesting. And I do understand that the ADHD and ASD can kind of hide each other a wee bit. Can see how much I've masked. In other words, suppressed myself, suppressed my natural way of being to be more acceptable and to fit in with others. What I wanted to share, I'm looking at my phone here just to get this right. So wanted to share, I just recently started on TikTok, because that's where so many of the younger generation get their learning, get their information. And a highly sensitive friend had posted on this little thing on Facebook. And it's an Alice in Wonderland picture, a cartoon picture. And it says at the top, "If I was Alice." And the cat is sitting in the tree and is saying to Alice, who's looking up at him from down below, "We are all mad here." And Alice says, "At me?" Now, I resonated and I posted it. And to date, 25.7 thousand views. So prior to that, with it just being a new account and I'm just feeling my way and I'm not brilliant at tech, the most views I'd had, I think, was 791. So while this is fabulous for me for starting to get new followers, starting to get out there, getting an idea of what they like, what's going to get their attention in order to be able to connect with them and help and teach them things. It's great getting new followers, but at the same time, it's really sad that 26,000 people nearly are all resonating with that. And yet I know this is the way the highly sensitives can be. We very much can turn things on ourselves. An example of that, so I've mentioned before that we are very good at reading people generally. So we can tell when we're reading people's energy. We're energy beings. It's not only the words that we speak and it's not only the body language. And actually, in my daughter's assessment, it's not just the five senses either. There's other senses, like the hot and cold. And that's something that I have. There's so many things that we have going on that we don't realize isn't just anybody, unless somebody isn't just everybody, unless somebody talks about it. So an example of that is I have a nephew who has been diagnosed on the spectrum. And initially they said that he couldn't go to mainstream school. But then, of course, he ended up going to mainstream school because they don't have the facilities. But anyway, back to the main point. The main point was he came to mine as a, for me to babysit. And on this occasion, he peed on the bathroom floor. So I said to him, "What happened?" "The toilet's too cold. The seat's too cold." And see, if he'd never said that, I wouldn't have realized that I have this. I've always felt the cold a lot, particularly my hands and my feet. Now I obviously wrap up more, and the right clothing makes a big difference. But the toilet seat, in my own home, I sit in my hands in the toilet seat and then I wash my hands because it's too cold for me. And when I go into the shower in public swimming pools where you can't adjust it, the water's too hot, it's scalding. But everybody else seems to be able to be under there and washing their hair, and it's not burning them. So that's just an example of the sensory things that can be difficult. And I know this nephew that I'm speaking about at school, particularly during lockdown, I think in winter when the windows were open, and he did have his jacket on, and he may have had his hat and scarf on, and he was freezing. And the teacher had, I think, gone to the head teacher, or I don't know if his support worker wasn't there. He was sharing a support worker, and the teacher said to the head that, there's something wrong with him. And the head teacher, or there's something up with him, I don't know the wording she used. And the head teacher came in and she took one look at him and said, yeah, there's something wrong with him. He's freezing. Look at him. He looks almost blue. And she did actually go away and get a heater and managed to put a heater, because it doesn't matter if the room was warm enough for all of the other children in there, it wasn't warm enough for him. And how can he possibly learn or concentrate when he's sitting there and he's absolutely frozen? So that's just a couple of examples. For myself, one of my sensitivities is hearing and misophonia, I believe it's called. So currently I work from home, and traveling on public transport, traveling on the train, being at the cinema, being at any talks, and people are rustling sweetie wrappers, it's like we really hear that noise, and it's really distracting. And no matter how hard I try to focus on whether it was the teacher, whether it was, somebody I've been going to talks to learn more about neurodiversity for myself, for my daughter, and for my work that I want to do helping people. Um, it's so distracting, the noise. We can't not hear it. Now, don't get me wrong, I have bought the wee flare ear things that you can put in, which apparently, instead of hearing this range of sound, you're only hearing this, so that maybe the really higher up rattly noises, etc., certain noises, it subdues them slightly. But traveling in public transport, I would be trying to just read my book and shut it all out. It's irritating. It's irritating, and I can't help that. It's how I am. I don't want to be irritated. I don't want to be getting worked up. But that's a wee bit of the sensory overload. One of the things that I really do want to say, because this is, I saw a really interesting video yesterday, because, as I say, that's my daughter went for her first the start of this assessment, and they'll be looking at everything. And as she was the counsellor, whatever, the professional was talking about autistic spectrum disorder, I was sitting saying, okay, so the hearing, that's and this and that, they're all autistic things. And then that was a bit of an identity shift for me again. I knew it was ADHD and bits of other things, and there can be crossover. It's not uncommon for the two things to go together. And maybe that's what hides it, because, and the woman explained it to my daughter and said, so for example, when you're ASD, autistic spectrum disorder, you really want to do things a certain way. But if you're also struggling with ADHD and you have the executive functioning difficulties, if you don't have the dopamine, which is the thing that helps to motivate us, it's then really hard to do these things, or almost impossible to do these things. And then there's the internal battle that goes on. So then if you've got a mum coming in and saying, oh my goodness, will you just tidy up your room? Why can't you just blah, blah, blah? That's where a lot of this kind of shame and self-loathing and not feeling good enough can come from, or also, as I've said, we turn it in on ourselves. Getting back to what I was saying about reading people, I realised, took me a long time, I've been quite slow to work out lots of things, and I'm being compassionate with myself about that. I sometimes would be talking to somebody and I would be thinking, they don't like me. But actually, I learned in time it was more, I don't like them. I was turning it back to me. What I was feeling was a disconnect. I wasn't feeling a connection with them. So I was feeling as though it was them. It was coming from them going, yeah, I don't like her. Because that's the way my brain worked. We can tend to take on responsibility for others. We want, and I think part of that is because we feel when people are anxious, we feel when people are angry, we feel when people are annoyed with us, whatever it is, we sense it, we feel it. We can physically feel it if you're a very empathic like me, and it's not comfortable. So we want everybody to be comfortable so that we can be comfortable, and we don't like people being upset, and we tend not to like violence and lots of these things. So it's taken a lot for me to realize that it's not my responsibility to be looking after absolutely everybody else. And that's a very good thing to be teaching your children. And it's a very good thing to take on yourself. Silly example of this is we're always trying to help. And if I saw somebody in the street looking at map and looking lost, I would automatically say, can I help? And maybe not everybody needs the help. So, I've had to take a step back and realize it's not my job. It's not all my job. And with our kids, it's not their job to make mum or dad happy. It's not their job to, it's not their responsibility. We're the adults. We're the ones that should be teaching them and helping them and making sure they're happy, if you know what I mean. So teaching, it's not your responsibility to save the world. It's not your responsibility to put everybody before you, and to teach them that their needs and their wants are valid. Something really important, I think, is to teach them about feelings. There's a saying, name it to tame it. So often with the heightened emotions that we feel, there can be a lot going on all at the one time. And being able to articulate what you're feeling is step number one. But what I would say here is, I think it was Brene Brown was talking about feelings and asking adults to write down all of the feelings and emotions. And she was really surprised at how limited the feedback, the lists were. Most people will know happiness and anger and sadness and maybe anxiety, but there's a huge amount. And I think the way she described it was, it's like it was something like, just imagine it was trying to do pottery with one arm tied behind your back. That's what it's like trying to articulate your feelings if you're not aware of all of these different emotions that are out there. So teaching them about emotions, it appears to me that you are quite frustrated right now that you're not able to do that thing. Or, so just helping to name the feelings, broadening their idea, and also anxiety. So often, I've spent a lot of my life in anxiety. So often, if we're doing something new, there can be some anxiety there. But there might be some excitement as well. This is something I want to do, so I'm quite excited about it. But there is also a part of me that's a wee bit anxious. So just kind of talking through their feelings with them helping them. We don't really get taught a huge amount about feelings. So that's one of the things that I would say with helping to support your child. Another thing to help support your child, learn as much as you can. That's what I've been doing. That's what I've been doing for 30 years. But with this new neurodiversity information, that's what I've been doing. So I don't tend to read paper books so much these days. I like audiobooks, they work for me. So listening to audiobooks about highly sensitive people, there's a wealth of information out there. YouTube, podcasts, books, seek and ye shall find. So the more you can understand about your child, the more you can help them to understand themselves, and the more that that's going to make life better for everybody in the household and also your relationship. And keeping that connection is what I would say is number one. Highly sensitive children really do need that support, and keeping that connection is key. And that comes from compassion, it comes from empathy, it comes from having realistic expectations. The more you learn about the neurodiverse brain and why things are difficult for them and why this thing is difficult, it just helps you to realize that they're not just being difficult. And because it's not easy, I'm not saying it's easy. And I've struggled. And another thing to be aware of is if you are dealing with a neurodiverse child or a highly sensitive child, potentially there might be some of that going on with you as well. So have some compassion for yourself. Also, for myself, we don't really like getting told what to do too much. I would say we learn more, and we're not all the same. So I'm talking from my own experience, but I know many of us don't like getting told what to do. So it's better to lead by example than telling them what to do. Excuse me. Apologies, had to take a break there because my daughter came in with the dog. That's one of the things as well. We can hate getting interrupted when we're in the middle of something. And that's partly because we can lose our train of thought, and it can be quite difficult to switch modes. So transitions, and yeah, that can lead to some irritability. But I did scribble down where I was at, which was lead by example. So we're not very good at being told what to do, some of us. And one of the things that I learned, so very strong-willed, I'm a very strong-willed person. My daughter is very strong-willed. I would say my nephews are very strong-willed. And we're all different in lots of ways too. So don't back them into a corner, because we will cut off our nose to spite our face. So, and I've learned this the hard way with my daughter, but try to give them a way out. Try to give them a way out. That doesn't always work, because sometimes and try to give them choices so that they feel that they have some kind of autonomy and control. So I would say, do you want A? Do you want to do A, or do you want to do B? Didn't always work, because 9 times out of 10, my daughter would say, I want to do something entirely different. And I said, no, that's not what I asked. We can do A or B. There can be great negotiators. Somebody once likened it, this I think might be ODD, oppositional defiant disorder, and there's another one as well. I don't know everything about everything. I'm just still learning. But sometimes it's like arguing with a drunk person. And there's no point in doing that, you know. So sometimes just letting things go at the time and resolving it when everybody's a wee bit calmer. Because can you imagine? So we went through a phase where I was perimenopausal. I'm out the other end of that, thankfully. And my daughter just the age range we were at, she's just starting that journey. So 2 hormonal females with neurodiversity, heightened emotions. Yeah, there was a lot of door slamming. There was even missiles thrown. And there have been times that I haven't been proud of my behaviour. That's been my emotional dysregulation partly. And what I would say is the more I've healed my own traumas, my own conditioning, my own societal conditioning and what's expected, and the more I've learned, the more I'm able to manage myself, and it's really transformed our relationship. So what I would say about that is a lot of what I was doing in my parenting was what I'd been modeled by my parents, which really wasn't great. But that's what I knew. So I had to learn new parenting ways. And actually, I've got a friend who's a counsellor who was very helpful. Can't remember the name of the book, but it was a book that talked about parenting, and there was marshmallow parenting at one end and helicopter parenting, and it was like, this is where you want to be, or you could be there or there, or then you've got the absolute neglect at the other end. And I was like, all right, I can see where I'm too soft and I can see where I'm too hard, but this is where I want to be. And trying to learn, but in keeping with what suits my daughter, because they're all individuals. It's not a one size fits all. And that is part of what's wrong. So I think I don't know if I started speaking about this. This is the way our brains work. But Billy Connolly, we jump all over the place. And sometimes we get back to where we were. So feel free if I lose my train of thought and there's something that I haven't said and you wanted to know, type in the comments and ask me, and I will pick it up and respond. But really interesting video I listened to yesterday, and it was a professional. I don't believe it didn't seem as though he had neurodiversity, but this was his area of expertise. And this is one of the messages that I want to get across. What if there's nothing wrong with your child? What if there's nothing wrong with you, if it's you? So you'll be like, yeah, but they really struggle with this. What if it's not us and it's the world that we live in? Because the world that we live in, we can't say it's all great. And as he was saying, somebody with autism, high sensitivity, ADHD, etc., that's really struggling in this current system, in this current world, in the current schooling system, in the wrong job, not getting the support. Yeah, super challenging. And we all go through traumas. And we all make mistakes with our children. I don't think any human being is going to get it perfectly. So there have been times when I've got it wrong and I've been in my bedroom crying after, a big blow up. And I got better at recognizing when things were happening, and I would take myself for the time out because I knew it wasn't constructive. And sometimes it's about picking your battles. And if I got it wrong after I'd cried, I'm a very emotional person, I would go through and apologize to my child. Now, this is not anything that I ever experienced with my parents. Things are changing, things have changed. So teaching them to take accountability for their part of things, that's me modeling that, and also modeling that I'm a human too, and I don't always get it right. And this is something that I also teach my daughter. We don't necessarily just respect authority because we've been told to. And actually, there can be a danger in that. And I'll get to that in a minute, hopefully. But for example, we're taught to conform from a very early age, to respect our elders, to respect people that are above us, better than us. And I'm not saying don't teach your children to be polite, etc. But I have very much taught my daughter, just because they're an adult and you're a child that doesn't mean it's okay for them to behave this way to you. And it doesn't mean that they're always right. And in our case, often they don't understand. And the younger ones in particular aren't always great at articulating, and nobody wants to listen half the time. We did have some major struggles with this. I've had struggles. I have been called, and this is not just at school, or, it can be, if people that knew me, I'm very direct, tend to be very honest. We tend to say what we mean and mean what we say. And I like to talk about the elephant in the room because, like I said earlier, we're picking up all this information. The what's not being said. I grew up in a family where you sweep everything under the carpet. Parents would have their big blow-ups. Nothing was ever resolved and talked about. It would just be a big blow-up, lots of not nice things said. Then they wouldn't speak for a few days, and then in time they would fall back in. So it was the same arguments being recycled and recycled because it was never being resolved. So it's quite excruciating growing up. We are all going to have our differences at times, but be aware that your children will really be absorbing all of that. And it can actually make us physically ill if we hold on to that. So again, it's about teaching them, mummy and daddy, mum and dad have, had a wee disagreement about this, and that's okay. That's relationships. We don't always agree on everything, and just always teaching them. I suppose back to the strong-willed children, I wanted to get to this part. So there was and I'll get back to the doctor. There was a book that really helped me. I tried lots of the typical parenting books because we didn't know there was neurodiversity, and lots of the things did not work. The time out, the naughty step. Reward charts are a wee bit better. Try what works for your child. Nothing works for everybody. We're all individuals. But one book that really helped me, and I can't remember the author, I believe it was called You Can't Make Me, but I Can Be Persuaded. And that's where I learned about, of course, she's a strong-willed child, and I'm a strong-willed mother. And these strategies tended to work better. And that's where I learned about not backing them into a corner. And that definitely helped as well. So back to this doctor who was saying, we all get traumatized. And probably the highly sensitives and the neurodiverse are more easily traumatized because of our sensitive nervous systems. And trauma doesn't need to be a massive thing. It can be, but it can be lots of wee things all the time. And really, trauma is just any time where we've not felt safe and we can hold on to these traumas. So we all experience trauma in life, I believe. And if we don't heal or deal with these traumas, then we hang on to them, and that can lead us to be living in hypervigilance or fight or flight. But this doctor was saying, so what does an autistic person that hasn't suffered trauma, that has had a supportive upbringing, that has found the right career for them, for their area of brilliance, this is what it can look like, But in this world that is set up for neurotypical people, and actually lots of neurotypical people are struggling too. I'm not going to say half the world's on antidepressants, but massive numbers of people are on antidepressants and struggling with anxiety, etc., etc., etc. That's not normal. This is a very sick world that we're living in. So, and then he started talking about neurotypical people and said, well, if we were to then look at, because when we're looking at the neurodiverse, it's very much their challenges. It doesn't tend to be their strengths. And if we were to look at neurotypical people, and all of the things that are wrong, all the things that human beings do, all the unhealthy coping strategies. And we might say that they're not honest. They don't just say what they mean. Sometimes they say something completely different because that's the societal conditioning of it's okay to say this, it's not okay to say that, it's okay to do this, you're acceptable if you behave that way. Excuse me. And it's not honest. And we don't get that. And we tend to take things literally. We tend to take instructions literally. So be very specific and be aware that they might miss out on the nuances. Because as children, we don't always ask the questions. We might be confused about things, and you know, if we don't voice it, people are never going to know. Advocate for your children. That's what I would say. My school experience was horrendous. I was the most belted girl in the year. I was having a really hard time at home. And then I was going into school and just getting more of the same belted punishment lines, all the rest of it. And all of that stuff really impacted on me. And I struggled, and it led to lots of unhealthy coping mechanisms, and then years of healing and unpacking and learning. And it really has been a journey of getting to who am I really, not what have people told me I am. One example, this is interesting. People say things to us, and it could be a school teacher or a parent or a friend or a partner. And we can just take that on board and believe that to be true about us, and it might not be. So one silly example, when I used to go clubbing, obviously we're going in, and in my case at that point, I was doing drugs. That was one of my coping mechanisms before I'd started on my healing path. And we'd go in, put the coat in the cloakroom, and my friend would just take my cloakroom ticket because I always managed to lose it. So she used to say I was a bit Dolly Dimple, as in simple. That's what she used to say, and I kind of took that on board. And then many years later, I'd said something self-deprecating about myself along these lines, and that my partner at the time had said, "Where did you get that from? You are one of the most organized, competent, blah 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 people that I know. So where are you getting this from?" And it's only when people highlight things that we go, "Oh, yeah, I am actually all of these things too." So one of the things that I would say is we can spend a lot of time focusing on tidy your room, you know, get your homework done, blah, blah, blah. And it can be, this is wrong about you, this is wrong about you, this is wrong about you, this is wrong about you. And I do believe that the neurodiverse and highly sensitive get corrected so much more than neurotypical. And that is part of what can lead to I'm not good enough, you know, I'm wrong, I'm bad, and that all just, it's not good. So what I would say is, I still have friends now that will say to me, whether it's in a professional capacity or whatever else, and they'll say, "You're really good at whatever it is," and I'm like, "Oh, thank you." And then I think about it. So what I would say that is very helpful is to point out their strengths to them at the time, and give them, it's not about giving them compliments. It's about, because it's not just about, oh, you're looking really pretty. And it's not about, with boys, oh, you're such a strong boy. Because that can be a pressure. I don't want to, but we don't want to be judged and valued purely on how we look. Look how that's looking in the world right now. But it can be, even if they fail at something, wow, you tried really hard at that there, and you just kept trying, and that's great. You know, that's a real strength that you just kept trying, and I love your determination. And with that determination, you'll get there. Things like that. So pointing out their strengths, or, I love how creative you are, or You're really good at coming up with ideas or answers to solutions to problems that I wouldn't think about. That's great. So, whatever it is, and when it comes to the boys, being a highly sensitive boy, that's a hard thing. I'm obviously Scottish, and west of Scotland, it's all about being big and strong and macho. And I think that's part of why it's really hard. Half the highly sensitives are males. But if they're being brought up that big boys don't cry, and this is, the kind of toxic masculinity, this is how you're supposed to be, and that's who they're trying to be, it's not really who they are. That can cause a big disconnect and a lot of problems for them. Let them know that you will always have their back no matter what. Even if you're the punching bag, your children need to know that you love them no matter what. And I remember sitting down with my daughter when she was a bit older, and I said, I just want to tell you something, darling. I tell her I love her every day, but it's one of those I love you. Probably just, don't really think about it. But I sat her down and I said, I just want to tell you something. I want to tell you that I will always love you no matter what you do. I may not like your behavior at the time, but it's not going to change my love for you. So there is nothing bad, that word, that you can do that is ever going to make me not love you as your mother. And there is nothing that you can do that's going to make me love you more. So you don't, it's trying to get that message across. I love you no matter what, and I will always have your back. And that was a message very much at school as well. I said, I, I need to be very careful because so much of my experience is through her experience, because things have changed dramatically from when I was younger. But a lot of them are her stories, and it's not really for me to I've got to value her privacy. But certain struggles at school, that there wasn't really the support happening at school. And I had said, well, I know the teacher's saying that you can't go out of class. But if she knows that a meltdown is coming, she does not want to be doing that in front of the class. So I said to her, if you're going to have a meltdown, if you're getting really upset about something, if you're going to be sick, these were some of the things, then just leave the class and go to the toilet or go to the office or whatever you need to do, and I will deal with the school. Don't you worry about that. I will deal with it. So I was always teaching her that it's okay to speak up for yourself. Try not to be rude, but it's always okay to speak up for yourself. And I think we don't really get taught to speak up for our needs and our wants. And for the highly empathic who are always thinking about everybody else, then they tend to put people before themselves, and you can really disconnect from yourself. You can really lose yourself, and you start to not know who you are. So teaching them that it's okay to speak up for their needs and wants doesn't mean they will always get their own way, but it's okay to let us know and let others know what you need and what you want. So that takes me back to the neurodiverse and highly sensitive people they do tend, there's higher rates of like sexual abuse and different kinds of abuse because they're not always reading signals. And I also believe it's because they don't like upsetting people and they put other people before themselves. So if you don't teach this to your child early on, if we're talking females, what happens then when they're getting into relationships with boys? There's going to be times that they're going to end up having sexual intercourse when they probably didn't really want to, because they've not wanted to upset that other person, as one example. So And there was an incident not too long ago when my daughter, who was almost 18, was walking home from work late at night, 11:30 at night. It was a foggy night, 0.2 miles from her work to home, and we live in a nice area. But she was walking home and she noticed a man standing, not walking, across the street on his phone at that time of night. So she was aware of him. And she instantly messaged her boyfriend and carried on walking. The next thing, I think she tried to phone him and he didn't pick up, so she maybe sent him a voice note. The next thing, this man is up behind her and has touched her shoulder, come up behind her and touched her shoulder. Now, no man should be doing that to a young woman. Most men should know that that is absolutely not okay and they're going to get the fright of their life. So obviously we've unpacked it all after the experience had happened, but I had to explain to her, I'm not giving you a row here. I'm trying to understand why, when you were worried, that's not okay. Next time, this is a learning thing. I understand in the heat of the moment, in the anxiety and the panic. But basically, this guy had Google Maps or whatever on his phone, and he was asking for directions to somewhere not too far away. Told her the address. She couldn't understand him terribly much. She said she thought he had a bit of an accent. So she typed the address in his phone and said, you just follow the arrows and that's the way you have to go. Excuse me. So off she was going, and he was, calling her back, and he tried to give her a drink out of an opened can. And she said, no, thank you. And he was quite insistent. And she said, no, thank you. I'm not going to drink that. So then he was trying to give her food. And she said, no, thank you. And this is where it's important to teach them about boundaries and autonomy and to put their own safety before other people's not wanting to be rude. That's what she said to me. He then preyed on that. We can be a bit naive and easily manipulated because we can see the best in people, and there's the taking things literally. So he then started telling her, you're not being very nice. I'm trying to say thank you. So I was saying, well, that's manipulation. You knew you did not want, and she said, look, I'm not going to do that. Please leave me alone, etc., etc. Now, it all ended up fine. She got away from him. Boyfriend phoned, and because he then started saying, where do you live? Do you have a boyfriend? Can I be your boyfriend? All this kind of stuff. And the boyfriend phoned, and he could hear the man talking, and he said, tell that person I'm your boyfriend, I live around the corner, and I'm on my way. So we did go to the police, etc., etc., but that's not relevant to this story. The point is we spoke through it, and I said, why did you not do this? Why did you do that? Why did, just to try and for the next time. And she said, well, what if I was wrong? I said, if your spider senses are going and you're not feeling comfortable, it's okay to run. It's okay to say, no, I can't help you. I didn't want to be rude. What if I was wrong? Because there's a lot of, what if I get it wrong? Or I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to hurt their feelings, all of these things. So that's just some things to be aware of. Yeah, I think I will leave it there for now. I don't want these videos to be too long. Yeah, we don't tell short stories. That's another thing. So I will continue to make these videos. They may not be the best quality. I am a recovering perfectionist. It's taken me a long time to get here and do the work on my own confidence, my own self-doubt, all of these things that we highly sensitives and neurodiverse can struggle with. So I decided just to start and get better at it. This is where I need help. So be aware of your strengths, get support where you need it. And that's what I will be doing here. So things will improve and get more professional as I go along. But people need help now. There just does not appear to be enough help. I've struggled. My daughter struggled. We've not had a lot of support. And I see on social media all the time so many people waiting for the mental health services. And this is where I could go off in a rant. They'll say there's not enough funding. There's not enough funding. The teachers are doing the best that they can. And I'm not slating any teachers. But I did write a letter to the school and said, see all of these things that you accused my daughter of? Big red flags. And while children are, it's compulsory for our children to go to school unless you're going to be homeschooling, the least you can do is make it a safe learning environment, because it wasn't a safe learning environment. It was highly damaging, mentally, emotionally, and it was not a good learning environment either. So it was very damaging. So I actually did write a letter to the school and I didn't even get a response. So this can be what we're dealing with. I really didn't appreciate that at all. So we need to advocate so they'll say there's not enough funding, but they've got tons of funding for cycle lanes. So our children are really struggling with mental health. Adults are really struggling with mental health. To me, this is somewhere they're our future. And if they don't get a good start, then it's going to impact all areas of their life. So advocate for them. I think the British, generalising, of course, are very good at moaning and not very good at actually complaining. And so complain, take action. Don't just accept things the way that they are. The only way things are going to change are if we speak up, if we advocate, if we say, no, this is not good enough. This is not good enough. We need better. You need to do better. So, and yeah, so maybe stop moaning and start complaining properly. Start advocating, because I'm sure if we got lists of where all the council money goes, we wouldn't be agreeing that this was the best use of the taxpayers' money all of the time. And I won't go on about that, or I'll just go on a rant. We don't like injustice either. So maybe we are not here to fit into this world. Maybe that's what the problem is. Maybe we're here to create change. Part of my makeup with just who I am, whether that's the ASD or the ADHD or just whatever it is, impatient, intolerant, I get irritated, I speak my mind, I say what I mean what I say. I'm not good at pretending, but that's what we do. Masking is just pretending and suppressing who we are, because we taught that it's not okay to be this and it's not okay to say this and it's not okay to do this. But if we weren't all quite so compliant and apathetic, then, and we actually did speak our truth, then maybe things would change a bit more. That's the power we have. We have the power. We have the power of numbers. What if all the parents, the neurodiverse numbers are growing? So it's not an insignificant minority. And I can think of one particular minority right now that there seems to be a huge amount of money being spent on. If the money was spent earlier, teaching our children, supporting our children, the highly sensitives, the neurodiverse, that would save a lot of money with the ones that end up in prison, for example. So let's put the funding in there sooner, and less of them will be in prison. And not only will they not be in prison or on the streets or doing drugs or self-harming or attempting suicide, because these are all things that are very real and the instances are higher in the neurodiverse by miles. If we can support them and get them where they belong, what are they good at, then they can be highly productive members of society, highly productive members. I mean, some people say that many of the great inventors were potentially on the spectrum. And that's, they've had their area of brilliance. And I look at my nephews and where they're going, and one of them is learning accountancy. He's always been brilliant at numbers. He's not great at getting on with other playmates. He can be very confrontational. So many of the neurodiverse end up being entrepreneurs because they can't work under other people, but they create things. So where I want to get to is, yes, let's heal and give you tools for the challenges and help you to understand yourself and learn to emotional resilience and how to manage and understand yourself. But where do you belong? What's your area of brilliance? Where can you excel? What's easy for you? And I know I said I was going to finish, but I will now. I'll leave it on this note. See if you are at the stage that your child is not wanting to go to school, school refusers, they call them, or they are really struggling, or they don't have any friends at school, or if they just want to be in the room, they won't do any activities. See, when they get to that stage, help them find their joy, help them connect with their joy. So when my daughter, I could see, I could feel it, I knew how difficult it was. And we just reached that point of, she was 16, she doesn't need to go there anymore. It's not a good learning environment. She went to college and I said, just pick anything at all. Pick anything at all. What could you do for fun right now? So she picked a subject and I thought of it as a year out, and I thought she will find her way because she has got a lot going for her. She will find her way, but before she can find her way, she needs to find her joy. She needs to find her confidence. And in her case, leaving school was the best thing that could have happened to her. She went to college, she got a part-time job, she's got a lovely boyfriend, she's got friends, a good friendship group. And I just watched her blossom and I watched her confidence grow. And the change in a year or a couple of years, yes, she's maturing, but that change has been remarkable because that was just such a damaging environment for her. A schooling system is not for everybody. It definitely is not. And, it's not, doesn't really suit the neurodiverse and the creatives. And I do believe we are the creators, the change makers, the rebels, the nonconformists. And I think we're this way for a reason. I think we're here to create change because impatient, intolerant people get things done and create change. So maybe that's what we're here for. Maybe that's a different way to look at it. Anyway, I hope you found this helpful. Please like, please comment, please share, please subscribe to the channel. And that just helps to get this information out to more people. So thank you, and lots of love. And yeah, hang in there. Things will get better.